All right, now we're at number 35. Okay, most of the time you're going to want to change things to sines and cosines. Okay, here's an exception. When you see squared symbols, like sine squared in the bottom here, and then secant squared up on top, typically you're going to want to check Pythagorean identities in order to try and simplify something like this. Particularly, why don't we look at the top here, secant squared minus 1. What can we do there? Well, if I look at Pythagorean identities, again I see that 1 plus tangent squared of an angle, we'll use x, equals secant squared. Okay, so how does that help us with our problem? In our problem we have secant squared minus 1. Well, what would happen if we subtracted 1 from both sides in this equation here? If I take and subtract 1 here and 1 here. Cancels out here. I'm left with tangent squared, x equals secant squared, minus 1. Okay, well, we had secant squared minus 1 up in our problem. So wherever we see secant squared, we can write in tangent squared. So this top just became tangent squared. Let's rewrite that now. So I have tangent squared on top, sine squared on the bottom. Okay. The next step, I'm going to break it up. I'm going to say that I want tangent squared on top over 1 times 1 over sine squared. Okay. And you may not see this step the first time you see this problem, but the more times you do problems like this, you'll start seeing this step also. Okay, now if I look back on page 372, I know that sine squared over cosine squared equals tangent squared. So where I see tangent here, I'm going to substitute in this. Okay, so it end up with sine squared on top over cosine squared times 1 over sine squared. I ran out of room. I'll just write it below, right here. Okay, so sine squared over cosine squared times 1 over sine squared. What does that equal? Well, the sine squareds cancel, so I'm left with 1 over cosine squared. Well, 1 over cosine squared isn't an answer. Alright, but its reciprocal is, the reciprocal, I'll get rid of all this stuff, the reciprocal of cosine is secant. So 1 over cosine squared equals secant squared, which is an answer. It's answer E. So you might have to watch this video a couple times, 2, 3 times, 4 times before you get this concept. But hopefully this helps.